Welcome to Couples in Focus, the podcast where we explore the fascinating world of relationships and uncover the secrets to building stronger, more meaningful connections. Whether you are navigating the complexities of love, seeking deeper emotional intimacy, or simply curious about what makes relationships thrive, this is your space for honest conversations, expert insights, and actionable advice. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's embark on a journey to unlock the potential of your relationship. This is Couples in Focus. So welcome back to another episode with the Couple in Focus. We got Michael here and of course me, Thomas, hosting the show. And it's great to have you all back for another episode. And yeah, we've been looking at questions coming in, and what seemed to be quite prominent, and also I think is common for both of us in our practice, is this idea of one person really wanting to go to couples therapy and the other person feeling that therapy might not really be what they want to do, right? And maybe it's even quite resistance to it. And I guess a big thing is then, what do I do if I'm in this place where I really want to try and do couples therapy? There's a lot of things that's not really working in this relationship, but my partner just is really resistant. Like, where do people start?
Yep. Generally speaking, that's how everybody shows up, right? There's when I hear two people that show up and they're both like, yeah, we were both really excited about this. Like that doesn't happen. I mean, it's happened, but it just doesn't happen, right? That's not how that works. But it's so important because I think there are a lot of people and a lot of relationships that there begins to grow this distance that at least one partner, right? That distance is going to be more distressing, but also they become aware of the distance a lot earlier than their other partner.
Yes.
Right. So they start becoming more and more unhappy. And it's not uncommon for one partner to say, hey, I'm unhappy because it feels like we're so distant. And the other partner to go, really?
Yes.
Like I had no idea, but I thought everything was great.
Yes.
And that can be a very, very different and jarring response for the person who's going, how can this be great for you? Yeah. How can this be okay? Right? Because that's just a very different way of experiencing the relationship. And then how do we broach the idea of like, I want to go to therapy. And then their partner goes, why would we do that?
Yes.
Like, I don't want to do that. Yes. I don't want to go talk to some stranger.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is a really important topic.
And, at least for me, and I presume it's probably similar for you, very often it's the woman that kind of reach out or had told the husband that they need to go now or the relationship is over, and then the husband might look out and look for somebody, right? That is, I'm not saying this is, again, it's not about gender, but in many cases that,
right.
And I even say there's an element of attachment style in this too. Again, it's not all about attachment styles, but very often I think the more anxious pursuer who is in a lot of distress and then get more and more angry and eventually maybe start giving up, they tend to be more likely to be the one saying, let's try and go to therapy. While the more withdrawal person who kind of is more self-reliant on their own regulation, they can also deal better with the disconnect, right?
Right.
Because that's how they learn to survive. Basically, that's what they had to do most of their childhood. So they tend to not as often, at least I find, be the one who reach out until there come this fracture point where one person might say, hey, if we don't go to therapy, the relationship is over. Then they might take some initiative to reach out for it, right? But it can be very difficult to try and get a partner into therapy who might not believe that therapy is working or valid, because why would people want to invest time and money in something they don't think will actually help them, right?
That's right.
So that resistance is quite valid, really. And if you have gotten used to a world where people don't respond to you, don't validate you, why would you want to go to therapy and pay money to have that experience again? Like, personally, I wouldn't want to pay for that, right? So if that's your anticipation of therapy, I just want to validate that it makes a lot of sense that there's resistance to therapy, right? And I often feel a lot of compassion for the people coming in. Most of the time it's men who come in and you can see they don't really want to be there, right?
No, especially, right? Well, what's really important about what you're doing, right? Which is so important on this show is I want to say it. I'll say it every episode, which is everything makes sense if we're willing to seek understanding and be curious. Everything. And so resistance to therapy, which to a partner is going to come across as they don't care about the relationship, right? If we really sit with that resistance is often really well-founded in the partner who's resisting. There's usually good reason. And the good reason could be terrible experience in therapy before. There's plenty of bad therapists out there. Yeah. It can be that they knew someone who went to therapy and it didn't help and they spent 10 grand and still ended up divorced, like whatever it is, right? They have this model of what it means to go to therapy. And they're just acting on that model. And you go, okay, that begins to make more sense to me.
Yes. And you know, for somebody who maybe never had an experience of being understood and validated, of course, they're not going to go into this thinking, oh, yeah, that's suddenly going to happen now after 40 years of never having this happen in my life, right?
That's right.
So for them, it can often be a very almost cathartic experience when they come into therapy and slowly, and what is fascinating is what I've seen is that resistance slowly then moves away as they start having these experiences in therapy, right? But again, as you said, and I said, it makes so much sense that they're resistant to it because they don't see a positive outcome is even possible. So that's...
If their history says exposing myself in any way leads to being let down, hurt, making a problem worse, why would they think going to therapy would be a helpful thing?
Exactly. And the reason I kind of start with this compassionate lens, and you're right, we try to bring it into every podcast. The reason I start with that level of understanding for the person who often, you know, are resistance to coming in is that can help us how we address when we start engaging and trying to get this person to come with us to couples therapy. If we come and attack them with our own narrative, they're probably likely to just become more resistant because to them, that's just, again, another signal I'm not really understood, right? So they then, of course, are going to shut down even more and we resist. If something can only have a negative outcome, then of course we're going to resist it. That just makes human sense, right?
It makes complete sense.
So I think it's really when we can put on this compassionate lens, and it is hard because often the other partner, of course, is in distress as well, right? And might be angry and saying, oh, he hadn't responded to me in many years. I'm angry. I'm tired of this. However, we do have to somehow put on a compassionate lens to try and get people to collaborate with things, right? It's very difficult to get a positive outcome purely through forcing other people, right? I think we've seen enough empires collapse to know that model doesn't work very well.
So I love this example because Apple is really good at doing what you're naming. As a company, if you take your computer, your device into Apple Store and you say, there's a problem with my device. Okay. They are trained to begin with acknowledgement. And what they'll say is, I mean, it's brilliant. And they'll go, let me make sure I understand the issue. When you hit the power button, your computer does this. And the customer goes, yes, that is what's happening. And then they're trained to empathize. And the next thing out of their mouth should be, that would be really frustrating if that were to keep happening. And the customer goes, it is really frustrating. Thank you. And they said, I want you to know I'm going to work with you to figure out what's happening to your product.
Yes.
So all of that sets up, because they know, generally speaking, I'm going to have to send this person's device away and it's probably going to be gone for 3 weeks and they're going to be really unhappy about that. Yeah. But they're going to be way more likely to comply when they believe, when they feel believed, when they feel compassion about the problem, and they feel I'm on their team and figuring it out. And then when I have to deliver the bad news, right, which is, you're going to need a new this, and we got to send it, like, we have to send that away. I am so sorry. I know that can be really frustrating. Like, they just do that. They massage that into the conversation. And generally speaking, they have a lot less resistance when the answer is, it doesn't look great. So that acknowledgement first is so important.
There we
And
go.
I think Apple does that really well. And I think it's part of why people love to go to Apple.
By the way, we are not sponsored by Apple.
No, we're not sponsored, but we'd love to be. Okay.
But you're right. It's a good framework, right?
It's a great framework, right?
So I'm
so
totally
important.
hearing the point here, which is that you're saying starting out by, and again, it's very difficult if the other person is in distress, but trying to acknowledge the fact of why there is this resistance. Because if we try to push or force it through or threaten our way through, which often is the case, right? It might be, oh, we are done if we don't go to couples therapy. Then yes, they might end up going with you out of fear of losing you.
That's right.
However, it doesn't mean there's collaboration or willingness to be there and engaging in the process, right?
Right.
So we get the best results if somebody shows up and somehow want to engage. And I think that's what you're explaining really well with this example. Yeah. How do we get people to want to collaborate? And for that to happen as human beings, we have to be able to see a benefit. We are not going to go into something that can only be painful for us and want to collaborate in that, right? That would be counter-organism in my own term, right?
Right. It wouldn't benefit me.
Yes.
So I want to slow down there because this is really, really important, because what we're naming here, right? And you tell me if you disagree, but when someone is unhappy, oftentimes the way they try to tell their partner about that is when things go awry and it comes out in an argument and they say something like, I'm just so unhappy in this relationship. And it's not ever going to get their partner to enlist in helping you with the unhappiness. Because when a partner, well, before I go there, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think that's often the case. That's right.
That's often the case. Yeah. So then the next part is, if I come to my partner and I say, I am so unhappy, even if I say that kind of softly, but like, I'm so unhappy in this relationship, I know what the meaning I know that people usually make of that moment, right? Yes. When one partner says, I'm so unhappy in this relationship. Yes. What do you know as the meaning, the normal meaning the other person's going to make in that moment?
Well, they might say, oh, something is wrong with me.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. They fill in the gap.
Yes.
Right. The gap that we talked about in another episode. That's and the end of that sentence that nobody said this, right? Or maybe, and sometimes they do. But if you go to your partner and you say, I'm unhappy in this relationship, period.
Yes.
And it's got any kind of heat to it, or what your partner is likely going to fill in for the rest of that sentence is, and it's your fault.
Yes, I failed. I can't get it right as a partner. Da, da, da.
And suddenly that's when they get resistance. It's because they're trying to prove
Yes.
I'm not bad.
That's right. They either have to push.
You.
That's right. They have to push back now, right?
That's
to
right.
protect the sense of self, their own
because
identity.
Could you imagine turning them and saying, "Yeah, I understand why I'm pretty terrible at this."
Yeah,
like but that's what's happening to them. Yes, right? That's what's happening.
Or they pull away more, and that's not how you get someone to engage and move forward, right? You need forward momentum. That's obviously going to create shame, and shame does the opposite. Shame shuts down, right?
Shame shuts us down.
So you can't mobilizing someone through shame. No. That's what we also know. I know you used to work with alcoholics, right? And we know that they don't improve through shame, through saying, oh, I can't believe you did that again. That's so bad. That doesn't make them change the behavior, right?
Absolutely.
Same with drug addicts. Actually, it makes it worse. We have to meet them again with compassion and say, we get you had a really, really hard moment and and slipped. So the fact is the same here. The only way to try getting somebody to collaborate is through compassion, right? And shame will do the complete opposite. It will make it harder. Threats can create can create short-term compliance, but that's not the same as willingness to want to be there, right? And if we really want a good outcome, we need willingness to want to be there, to engage in a process. Right. And that's why I say threats doesn't work. Shame doesn't work. And I also want to have compassion for maybe the more anxious pursuer, because of course I also get that when we have built up this frustration for, I don't know, maybe many years, then it's really hard to sit and feel compassion for this other person, because we are raging inside. We have all this that needs to come out. So it's much easier to come and say, you done this and you're making me unhappy and it's your fault and you have to now find a therapist and da. Yep. And then maybe very reluctantly, they will come and try and speak to you and say, oh, my wife wants us to go to therapy.
Right.
But you can sense they don't really want to be there, right?
That's right. That's right. So we want to start by saying approaching this topic can be really, really difficult, because even by naming your unhappiness, your partner can hear the message, you make me unhappy.
Yes, I am faulty. Very
And
much,
then we aren't going to, that's not going to be forward motion.
Yes.
Right. And so even in how we begin this conversation is so important, right? Coming to our partner and talking about what's happening in the relationship. And this is where therapy is so helpful, because we want to help hold a space and understand the way things are impacting both people, which can be really hard in a relationship.
Yes.
But if I can offer even a piece of advice here, if there is someone listening who says, I am unhappy and I don't even know how to broach that subject, right?
Yes.
It can be helpful to even name that with your partner, right? To be able to go to your partner and say, can we talk about our relationship? I want to name how I'm feeling, and I want you to know before I even go into it, I'm not blaming you, and I don't think this is your fault, but I think that we have both contributed to an unhappy and disconnected, or whatever the issue you have, relationship.
Yes.
Right. And I want to figure out a way for both of us to enjoy this relationship.
Yes.
Right.
And that's important what you're saying, right? Because what you're saying is, hey, we kind of highlighted here what is normally the main fear of the other person and their interpretation. And by knowing that, we can now address it in a new way. Because just like you said, the example with Apple, we can address what we know their fundamental fear is, that, oh, I'm faulty, I'm a failure, And we can, like you said, say, this is not about you. This is about us.
Yes.
And I want us to get better. And it's nobody's fault. Then we almost de-arm the landmine. Shame is like a landmine waiting to explode, right?
Absolutely.
It's kind of, we de-arm. We say, okay, we pull out the pin here so it can't explode, right? And you do that in that statement you just did there, right? Because you address what we know is their fear. And now they don't have to shut down. That means there can be forward motion, right? And maybe. It also, maybe, yes. Yeah. But it creates a potential, at least, because nobody's going to go step on a landmine, right? So we first have to disarm the landmine for them to be any chance of walking into this field. So that statement kind of helped disarm that. And then there's also just and I can't remember, we talked about this on another podcast, but this, how we use you versus I way of communicating, right? Because when we go in, and of course, we often do this when we're distressed. We go in and maybe say, oh, you did this. You're always late. I'm sick of the way you don't show me any affection. It's you. It's accusations. It's criticism.
Usually that's the conversation where therapy comes up on the heels of that.
Yes.
Right. That is a massive reason why it is so hard, because often people will say, we're just going to go to therapy so you can yell at me in front of somebody else.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Or make me feel that I'm wrong in front of them. Right.
That's right.
And of course, there's not going to be willingness for that. Right.
Yeah. Nobody and what if the therapist agrees with my partner?
Yes.
Like that I am the problem. And now I've got two people telling me I'm the problem.
Saying that I'm that problem, which validate my fear that I'm faulty, right. So exactly. Yeah. And this is why, if we can even change, and it makes such a difference, because the traditional you statements will always activate, we refer to as amygdala, right? Which is part of the fear response. And that means, again, when that is activated, the responses we have are very limited. We don't have much we can do. We can fight back, or we can shut down, right? Or we can just collapse, etc. Or we can try and please, but there's not much options here left. When we instead, like you did in your example, start focusing on the I feel really, that we are more disconnected, and I really miss feeling connected again. And I want us to have a better relationship. I want to figure this out together.
That's right.
And it would be really important to me if we can try and go to a therapist who can help us figure out why we are somehow missing each other. Yeah, this doesn't, again, push that blame onto one person, so they don't have to go into a fear response. Instead, we can now activate more of an empathetic response, right? If you explain the impact it's having, if you say instead, hey, actually, I'm really sad because I miss how we were really connected. I really want that. And
right.
somehow we lost that along the way. And I crave that so much. That's more likely to have an empathetic response. Together with what you said, making clear, addressing their fear, saying, hey, this is not about you. You haven't caused this. We somehow ended up here.
That's right. I think, when I don't really, there are times that I like I statements. But I really like we statements more than anything in these conversations. Like somehow we ended up in this place.
Yes.
Right. And I know I feel more disconnected. I don't know how you feel.
Yes.
And that's part of feeling disconnected is because I don't know how you feel.
Yeah.
And I don't want to continue not to know.
Yes.
So we're inviting our partner not to say, you make me unhappy, but to say, I really want to know you.
Yeah.
And when I don't know you, I feel disconnected. And when I feel disconnected to you, that makes me feel I'm unhappy about that.
Yes.
Right. And I want to change that. And the thing that I want to change isn't that you make me happy, but I want to find a way to be connected again.
That's right.
And then, right, once we kind of can set that up a bit, right, notice the approach here isn't on the heels of an argument or as a threat, right? All of those strategies, which are more damaging than they are helpful. Although I will say, I'll talk about something in a minute here when it's like, what happens when nothing happens, right? But we'll get there in a second. Mm-hmm. But the approach that we're offering here is to come in and really actually be still in your own body first, right? Like check your own reactivity here and ask yourself, kind of, where am I in this relationship? And do I know where my partner is? And oftentimes it's not knowing where your partner is, right? It's the not knowing that goes, that's the thing that makes me feel disconnected.
Yes.
When I don't know where they are, because we're not having the same conversation, right? A new relationship. We talked, we dressed up for each other. We complimented each other. We shared with each other. And then suddenly here we are 1 year, 10 years, 12 years later, 2 kids later, whatever it is. And we're not doing those things anymore.
Yes.
And I don't know where my partner is.
Yes.
And when I don't know where my partner is, that does not feel good to me.
Yeah.
And so that would be the first thing I would ask you to do, is to take some time and really sit with that and use that language for kind of charting out your own, right? Write it down, do some journaling. This is a really lovely spot to do that so that you can get more clear, because as we say on this podcast, clear is kind, right? And I didn't invent that, but I like to steal it. Yes. So clear is kind, right? And so the other thing, the next part of it is, how do we begin to introduce the topic of counseling?
But you actually said something really important. I just quickly want to touch on.
I appreciate that.
That's how to do it. But it's you said that timing. You talked about timing as well in there, and timing is so important. I even remember a long time ago reading a business book where they found out, a big study at Harvard, where they found out that timing was a key factor between success and failure. And I think timing has a huge impact as well in how we time when we bring this message across. Because you're spot on. If we do it right at the peak of an argument, if we do it when the other person come home and maybe are really stressed, had a really rubbish day, right? Then it's not likely to have a good reception. If we do it in, and it might even be rare if couples are in a lot of distress, but if we find a moment where at least we have less distress, maybe even have a small level of something positive experience together, that's a good time to start engaging with topics, right? Because again, there's more capacity to hear each other when we're in that place than when we're in a stressful moment.
So I think even naming what you're naming right there is really important, because, and I'm going to stop pulling on this thread in just a second, because oftentimes people are going to say, but I go to my partner and I say, hey, can we talk? Mm-hmm. And right there, when I'm asking that question, what I'm saying is, right now is a good time for me to talk to you.
Yes.
Right. And it may not be a good time for your partner. Right. Maybe they just got home. Maybe they're in the middle of reading some article, and they don't want, they're not ready to shift out of that yet. Right. And we can invite the partner to say, hey, is this a good time for you?
Yes.
And they say, give me a minute. Say, okay, I'm happy to give you a minute. Will you please let me know when you're ready? right? So we invite them to be collaborative in the timing of the conversation as well.
Yes.
Right. That's so, it's massive, right? So we're going to say this really clearly because I want to be as clear as I can about this. If the topic of unhappiness and counseling is coming up on the heels of an argument or in the middle of an argument, or just as we start ramping up, it is going to fail, yes. Period. Mm-hmm. Like it is very, very rare for that to go well. Yes. So what we're saying is the first thing you got to do is get clear in yourself about how this is a problem that we are facing.
Yes.
And what is happening to you when there's distance in the relationship, and finding a good time to begin talking about this when there isn't a heated moment and we've just had an argument. And that's likely to fail, but to find a time together to sit and say, hey, there are concerns I have about our relationship and my experience of it.
Yes.
And I can imagine you may have your own concerns, and I'm open to hearing about those.
Yes.
And can we begin talking about our relationship in a productive way?
Yes.
Because when we aren't talking about us, it's really hard for me.
That's it.
Right?
And I think that's spot on. The only thing I would add on top as well is the fact of focusing on a positive outcome. Because again, as humans being, we are only motivated to move towards something.
We want something better.
Yes, exactly. So that's important. Right. Instead of going in with this, and we talked about it already, or you're in the wrong. Nobody wants to come if they think the outcome is that they're going to sit there and be criticized by a therapist and their partner. But if they can see that there could be a positive outcome, right? And say, I want us to feel how we felt when we first met. Remember how we laughed a lot, how we enjoyed our sex life, how we felt connected. That's what I crave for us to find again. That is now a positive incentive for somebody to move toward, because they can say, yeah, that felt really good. Right. And now we are incentivized towards action and moving toward things that can have a positive outcome for us. Right. So that gives a sense of motivation. Exactly. Because we do need a bit of dopamine. The dopamine system have to come online. Otherwise, we don't take action. That's just how we are wired. Right. And this gives the dopamine a little hit to say there is this positive outcome that's possible, right? And that help motivate action.
Yep. And so I think that's really important. And I'll pause it there. And I want to move on to the next part, which is how do we bring up therapy?
Yeah.
Right. Because that's a hard part. So we've come in, we've tried to, as compassionately as we can. And I'm not saying if you do everything we said, if you write down word for word and shape it to your relationship, then it's going to be perfect and your partner's going to receive it and everything's going to be good, right? We're just saying this is the most successful way you can go about trying to set this up, and your partner might still go, I don't care. Yes. Right? Like that could still happen. It still doesn't mean it's going to be perfect, and we can talk about that in a second.
Yes. But
how do we broach the subject of therapy? And I want to use a word that we've said already on the show, which is therapy. If you want to be successful here, I would approach it collaboratively.
Yes.
Right. Which is, I've introduced the topic. My partner seems at least somewhat receptive. Like they're able to say like, yeah, I've kind of noticed, we've let something go. And, and look, if you're a female partner, we're, speaking to generalities here, and you want your husband to listen, your partner to listen. And you say, and I'd really like to get back to that. Like, we had more regular sex at the beginning of our relationship. You've caught their attention, right? now you're like, oh, okay, wait a second. You're right. We have had less sex, and that would be really great to fix, right? So great. If that's an incentive, make that happen. But let's say they bite, right? They bite and they're in the conversation. If you are thinking that therapy is what you want to do, you want to try, offer that. Right? But approach it collaboratively.
Yes.
So what I'm saying here is you can offer your partner, I don't know what we really need here. And maybe I don't know how to get that back. And when I don't know, I think maybe we can get help.
Yes.
Maybe a therapist would be helpful in finding our way back to a really connected and fun relationship that we both enjoy.
Yes.
What do you think?
Yes.
Right. So now you're inviting them not into a directive, but a conversation.
That's right.
Right. And you might find your partner's resistant. And when we meet resistance, we get curious.
Yes.
Right? If you meet that resistance with, I knew you were going to say that, right? Guess what? Off we go into the cycle and into the dance, and our great attempt to set this up just ended up in another argument.
Yes.
And you go, I tried, I did what you all said. And then he said he didn't want to go anyways. And it's like, yeah, okay, because he's resistant. Yes. If we meet our partner's resistance around any topic with some curiosity, 9 times out of 10, that's going to go much better.
Yes.
Than responding reactively with, I knew you were going to say that.
Yes.
Right. So let me toss it over to you, Thomas. How does that land with you?
No, I think it's spot on, man. I think it's spot on. I think the thing that came up as you were talking about this was I was trying to, I don't have avoidant attachment style, but I was trying to imagine being in that place of receiving the message, right? Mm-hmm. And I know, we both understand this attachment style, and avoidance obviously struggle, I think, with the word help, because they have learned, no, I don't need anybody's help. I can do this on my own. So I think often there's an internal resistance to the idea, we don't need help, I don't need help. Yeah, I can sort stuff out myself. So, and I'm brainstorming live actually, because this came up right as I was trying to imagine being in the receiving end. I wonder if there's a different kind of word than the word help that might be able to kind of move past that resistance that very often come up, right? Because a lot of these people would very happily have a coach that helped them with their fitness stuff, right? Or whatever it might be.
They take their car to the mechanic.
Yes, right? But anything that makes them feel that they are faulty or broken or something is wrong with them and they need help will be met with resistance. And I think often the word therapist and help straight away can send that message to their nervous system, right? Oh, I need fixing, right? You think
something's broken with me, something's wrong with me.
That's it. And understanding that, we can already see through this empathetic lens that would bring up resistance, right? Because it's like, I don't want to be fixed, and I don't want somebody to say, so yeah, I'm just wondering, maybe there's some other kind of terminology or words that can be used and say, hey, I really would be great to have someone who can guide us back on track. Or I don't know, like I said, I'm just brainstorming live. Some different words that doesn't trigger that primal fear that obviously is very often in the more withdrawal, hesitant partner who doesn't want to feel something is wrong, who doesn't want to feel they need help from other people. But they are often, open to guidance or often, it's interesting when they come in, they will often say, when I talk about the goals of therapy, right? They will say, oh, I'm hoping that we get some kind of advice or something, that you have some advice of what I can do.
That's right.
Things like that, right? And that will often be what they say. So yeah, maybe there's something around the terminology that could slightly be changed to have a different outcome or response. I'm actually going to ponder on this, and maybe we can post some comments under our video when we come up with some new words that people can use.
So I would offer in a curious place, right? This is what I love about curiosity. I don't have to find the exact words to make my partner interested. If I can find the resistance, right? So if I said to my partner, what do you think about going to therapy? And they're like, oh, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And my reaction is, oh, okay. Like, I'd love to understand why.
Yes.
Right? Not like, I don't mean like, why not? I literally mean, what is coming up for you when I mention that? What are you thinking? Like, help me understand. Yes. Right? And you might hear your partner say like, why do we need someone to tell us how to love each other?
There's nothing wrong with us.
There's nothing, right. And we go, I hear you, right? Why do we need to go pay somebody to tell us how to be in a relationship? Why do we need to do that? Why do we need to do that? And that's a totally legitimate response. Like, why do we need that, right? And so when you hear the resistance, again, if you can meet it with compassion, like, oh, yeah, it does feel weird. It feels weird that we used to be able to do this really well.
Yeah.
And why can't we do it anymore? Yes. That's actually a really good question.
Yes.
I don't really have a great answer for that. I don't have a great answer for why we can't just do it. But what I do have a sense of is that we aren't doing it.
Yes. And what you're saying is important, because before we talked about the state of mind and check in what state of mind your partner is in before bringing this up. But what you're talking about now is also, what is the state of mind of you before you bring this up, right? The person who brings, because if you're in a triggered place, you're not going to be able to communicate like this from a compassionate place, meaning you have to check in also with yourself.
Yes.
Where am I now right in the moment when I want to have this? If you're triggered, don't start it, because there's zero chance you will be able to have this kind of empathy for your partner, right?
Ask yourself that question beforehand. Will I be willing to listen to my partner's resistance?
Yes.
And be curious. If you ask yourself that question and the answer is not right now,
yes, then don't start that conversation.
Don't do this. Right, back up. But if you can position yourself, right, and understand, like, their resistance isn't a reflection of their care for the relationship. It's a reflection of their resistance to wanting to be that exposed.
Yes.
And who wants to be that exposed, right?
Yes.
I get that. It's a therapy is a vulnerable process.
Yeah.
And
what might they find, right? What might they find when we go there?
Right. Our anxious pursuers, they're asking for vulnerability all the time, and they're like, well, please be vulnerable with me, share with me. So that comes more naturally and desirably to you. So when you think about going to therapy, you're like, let's get it.
Yeah.
But that level of vulnerability and exposure doesn't set off like in an anxious pursuer's world, that sets off a massive green light for connection.
Yes.
Whereas your partner, if it's that avoidant, withdrawing partner, that level of exposure is a red light. It's a dangerous thing to do.
Yes, that's right.
It doesn't scream, here comes connection. It doesn't scream, here comes help. It doesn't scream, this feels good. It screams, yikes. I'm going to be out there drifting in the sea, no lifeboat, no helicopters, just sharks in the water and no protection.
Yes.
And who? Like, it would be like saying, hey, do you want to go feed sharks in the ocean? Oh yeah, cool. Let's get in one of the cages and stuff. No. We're just gonna cover you in blood and throw you in the water.
Yes.
And you're gonna have some fish and you're gonna hand it to the sharks. And it's like, no, I want the cage. I want the cage. I'm not that lady out there scuba diving, putting my hand on that.
That lady yes.
Yeah, she's so cool. She's so cool, like putting her hand on the shark and just guiding it away. I'm out there going like, shark, no. Like I'm the one like, no, right? I want that cage.
Yes.
But that's what you're asking your partner to do, right? If they're the more avoidant partner, like really settle in that you aren't inviting your partner to the same experience. Ooh, I like the way I said that, right? You think you're going to an experience where you get to have great connection because you're going to get more vulnerable and more clear and all those things. Yes. And to you, that's like saying, let's go to a picnic at Hyde Park on a sunny day when it's 20 degrees outside. What a lovely day we're going to have. We'll pick flowers. It'll be really good. To your partner, you're asking them to go to the Eye of Mordor.
Yes.
Like, this is not a fun experience.
Yes.
I'm going to be walking in the desert. It's going to be no water, no food, no shelter.
Yes.
And so you're asking them to come to a very different internal experience of what it means to be exposed and vulnerable.
Yes.
And so the resistance you feel is going to be coming from what it means to go to therapy, what it means to be exposed.
Yeah. And you know what? I think what you said here summarizes this podcast perfectly. And it's actually a beautiful place to end this, because the overall arc of all these different things we talked about, how to engage with this topic, is that the only way forward is through a compassionate lens, right? And that's why we are trying to create understanding from the different perspectives that are having when having these conversations, because the only way forward is through compassion, right? There's no specific technique that's going to make your partner do exactly what you want. And, we're not here to teach you manipulative strategies.
That's right.
So I think, this is why it's so important, because everything here is about what is the experience of the other person. And we, of course, interpret the world through our own frame of reference. So often, if I have anxious pursuer, I will interpret the world through that, and it will be hard to understand why somebody would have this resistance. And can't they just see, of course, it will be better to get some help, and do they not care? And the other person, from their perspective, are probably looking at it, whoa, why is he constantly coming at me? Why is there always something wrong with me, right? So we're trying to give here a lens, so you can take on a new lens and see, oh, this is how it is for my partner. And maybe they can take a lens if they listen to this and see, oh, this is how it is to be you. And through that, you can actually start reconnecting. Through that, you can start hearing each other's perspective. And you gave a perfect example of how to do that. If you are able to go into that place where you say, how might it be for this person to get this message, right?
That's right.
And through that, it's probably the best opportunity of having a positive outcome, right? So it's about how can we understand, how can we engage through compassion.
So I love that. And it's got me thinking about something I can hand our listeners as we end. And it's going to be this. If this is where you are in your relationship, and this podcast has been really helpful, I want you to write these things down because I think it's going to be a good guide. What we're saying is approach the problem. So we're going to give you 3 C's. If you're unhappy, that means there's a problem in your relationship. Approach the problem collaboratively, right? How did we get here? What did I do? How did I contribute? How do I see my partner contribute? And can we talk collaboratively about the problem? So approach problems collaboratively. That's C number 1. Listen or approach experience compassionately. That's your second C. Approach their experience with compassion. Okay, that's your C. So we've got first C is collaborative, second C is compassion, and the final C is approach resistance curiously. And approach your partner's resistance with curiosity. And if you can approach this with collaboration, compassion, and curiosity, your conversation is likely to go at least differently than the other attempts in the past.
Yes. And that's a beautiful place to close this, right? I think people had a good 40 minutes here of how to engage, and let us know how it goes, post in the comments.
Absolutely.
How your conversation goes and any questions you have. So Michael, as always, it's been awesome to do this podcast, and I can't wait to be back next week, and we will pick another topic to dive into.
Sounds good. I'll see you then, Thomas.
I'll see you then.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to Couples in Focus. We hope today's episode brought you valuable insights and some practical tools to strengthen your relationship. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another podcast. And if you found it helpful, please leave us a review. Your feedback really helps us reach more people who can benefit from this content. And also share this episode with friends or loved ones who might find it useful, because together we can create a ripple effect of stronger and healthier relationships. For more resources or expert guidance, visit Thomas's website on coupletherapy.earth or check out Michael's work on thesecurecouple.com. Both are filled with tools and insights to help you navigate your journey towards a deeper connection and understanding. Until next time, take care of yourself and your relationship. This is Couples in Focus signing off.